Mitch, it's hard, first of all. I'll tell you that. It was a lot easier 15 or 20 years ago. But it's also a lot more exciting, I think, for people these days in this world. And so really it comes down to people, process, and technology, right, Mitch? And I think finance organizations today are asked to do more than just kind of close the books and tell you what happened in the rearview mirror. They're an integral part of that decision-making process and how we allocate resources across the firm. And it starts with people, honestly. That's the first place. And I think what we try to do is spend a lot of time trying to grow people's experiences. And by gaining different experiences, which I had the opportunity to do in my career, when I was at Dell for 17 years, I had 8 different jobs. And in those 8 different jobs, I acquired different skills in every kind of stint. And that enabled me over time to connect the dots. I can see around corners because I've seen the commercial side of the business. I've seen the product side of the business. I know the supply chain. I know the marketing elements. I know treasury aspects of the business. Those were all experiences that gave me the opportunity to connect the dots in a dynamic world. And so we try to do the same thing across our portfolio companies. And I try to do the same thing across the finance teams that I was a part of over the years, which is really give people different experiences to help them grow and make sure that you continue to raise the bar. Today, if you're not moving forward, you're stuck. You're moving backwards. And so you have to raise the bar and hold yourself accountable to that new bar as it continues to rise over time. And then give people really transparent and frequent coaching. And a lot of people will say transparent and frequent feedback. There's a difference between giving feedback and giving coaching. So giving feedback might say, look, Gary, you're not very good at influencing. And like anybody can give you that feedback. What great people do to develop great people is then give them the coaching to actually build that skill. And Gary, when you're in this meeting, I saw the fact that you really weren't listening to that person's perspective. In order to influence, you have to understand someone else's perspective. So make sure you're listening well and translating then how you're reacting with them. And so I really think that people is the be all end all. I had an executive of mine at Dell tell me one time, you need to walk in the door thinking you're only as good as your team. And when you walk in the door thinking like that versus you walk in the door thinking I've got to get X, Y, Z done today, you do things very differently. And your team will realize that and they'll value that. And in today's day and age, sure, you can pay some people some more money and the like, but to really attract and develop great teams, you have to really, give them those experiences and opportunities for them to grow. And that's the type of people. So one is people. Two is process. Process, I think, is super undervalued in the world today. And it starts and ends with a continuous improvement mindset. And again, like I said earlier, Mitch, I think, if you're standing still, you're going behind, you're going backwards today. And that mindset really translates into the ability to make changes that influence outcomes that are meaningful in nature versus just kind of moving all the sand around, and a lot of people are very active, but they may not actually be impactful. And that's a very important distinction to derive in today's world, because from a process perspective, people get very focused on activities instead of outcomes. And so today, I think just reorienting that is important. Also, in an AI world, I would argue in any world actually, but even more accelerated in an AI world, you don't understand process, you don't know where you're starting from, right? A process is simply people, time, money, and yield. And so if you don't understand what that looks like today in any business problem or context you're trying to solve, and then you introduce something new to it, like a new technology, which I'll come to in a minute, you actually don't know if you've improved anything or if you changed anything, or you have to redesign that process. And, today technology assumes that a lot of people assume technology will solve the problem. And really you need people and process first. And then the third part is for sure technology. I think technology and the rate of change that we're experiencing in those platforms and the capabilities that gives us to do today has never been better and never more exciting. That being said, I think the organizations that keep it simple and have a flexible approach to technology are the ones that will win over time. And in the finance world, it's never more important. A lot of what we do is ensure we have the right data set to make decisions. And that data set, I can give you example after example where, companies have been at, there's 4 different systems where a new customer is captured. And there's like 20 different attributes, and some of them are alike and not alike. And then you want to go do the analytics of the customer segmentation, small, medium, large in your business, and how we're winning and losing on price. And like you're all over the place. You actually don't have the right data set. Then what do you need? You need data engineers. Data engineers need to manipulate all that data. Where the real problem is the root cause is going all the way upstream and actually capturing that data right the first time. So technology is an enabler to people and process, and that's still true in an agentic world. And it's never actually more true. In order to get people to adopt new technology, humans have to actually change the way they're doing work. And that's not a trivial task. A lot of human behavior is built around inertia. I've done this way, therefore I'm going to do it that way tomorrow, unless actually prodded to do something differently. And so we've translated all that into the finance arena. And, it's true across people, and it's true across finance organizations that are asked to do the same. People, process, technology, in that order.
Wow, there were so many nuggets in what you just said that I feel like we could spend an hour just breaking down the last 5 minutes of the conversation. I want to draw out. I mean, one of the things you said really struck me as a Rochester person. Continuous improvement, Meliora. I mean, it seems in our motto, in our blood at Rochester. But the other piece that I just you said thinking about, coming in thinking about is you're only as good as your team, and having the kind of coaching uh, capacity from a leader like you discussed. I mean, that's just a fantastic opportunity for people. And I'm thinking about the folks that are either, starting their careers or, even, a little further into their careers. Drawing from your experience as CFO and working in the various industries you've worked in, what advice would you give to people to be thinking about how do you get that support in their careers in finance or in the financial services industry?
Yeah. Again, I always try and keep it simple, Mitch. And the whole idea here is a couple of things. One is be curious, right? And that curiosity, some people demonstrate that in different ways, but asking good questions, the first, second, third, fourth, fifth order question to really understand something before you dive in. And, in today's 3-minute world that we live in, unfortunately, not a lot of people take the time to do that. They want the answer yesterday. They want to see it in 3 minutes. And in what we're trying to do in this dynamic environment, the curiosity to understand, it has to be something that you bring to the table. Maybe the best person I've ever seen in the world with this is Michael Dell. Michael Dell's the ultimate in that, right? He was curious about why it costs so much to put this personal computer thing together. And he just kept asking the second, third, fourth, fifth order questions, dug into the supply chain, understood the components that go into that PC, and really disintermediated the middle person in a business model. He didn't come up with a new technology. He didn't come up with kind of this new whiz bang thing. He just actually was curious about why things were happening the way they were, and then therefore what opportunity was there. And so that curiosity has to be at the forefront of what you bring to the table in today's world. I think the second part is, have a high say-do ratio. And, again, you're not going to read that in a book anywhere, or finance or anything like that. But a high say-do ratio is something, my dad instilled in me a very long time ago, which was, and it's really there's 2 components in that, say and do. And so the say part is if you say something, you should do it. But the say part is what most young professionals miss, is that they always say yes, right? So, hey, Gary, can you do this by tomorrow at noon? Yeah, I can do that. That's often the answer. Whereas, again, back to my curious part, maybe it's like, meanwhile, in your head, you're like, I've got to stay here till 2 o'clock in the morning to get that all done, and I'm probably not going to get it done. And so at that moment, you have a choice to make. Should I say yes or should I not? And most of the time, if you ask a clarifying question, well, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Manager, are you going to make a decision based on that by noon tomorrow? Most of the time they say, no, I'm actually not. And so you give them the opportunity to then repivot and reset a time frame that's maybe more conducive to you getting that actually done. And when you do that, that manager appreciates that curiosity. It's not you saying no, you didn't say no, you're just repositioning how you can work to get things done with him or her. And so that say-do ratio also is inherent in building trust. And building trust in today's world, when things are moving really, really fast, you have to know you can trust somebody, right? Because you're probably going to get it wrong here and there. But for the most part, that trust building is something that I spent a lot of time in my career. When you look back at my career, Mitch, I did a lot of firsts, right? I was the first one to go to college on both sides of my family, first one to get a graduate degree. I was the first one at Dell to raise corporate debt. You just kind of go on and on and on through my career. And the reason I think people gave me the opportunity to do something first was because I built that trust. And I built that trust through having a high say-do ratio. So be curious, have a high say-do ratio. And the third part is seek and value different perspectives in the world. That difference in perspective helps you be a better person and also a better decision maker. It helps you be a better teammate. It helps you be a better leader, right? You just can't walk through the world thinking it through the eyes and lens that you kind of bring to the table. And by valuing, not only actually thinking about that perspective, but valuing it. And what I mean by that is that, a lot of times I would start a global call at Dell and, I'd ask Susie from Bratislava, Slovakia, what'd you do this weekend? And, Susie would be like, hey, it's the springtime. We're harvesting, grapes in the vineyard and we're having a big wine festival. And so next week, when I got back on that call, that same group of people, I asked Susie, hey, Susie, how the wine festival go? How's wine turning out this year? And so that demonstrates that you listen to what that person said and you value what they're doing in their aspect of the world. And so it's not just about, kind of what's in it for you. It's demonstrating you care about somebody else by seeking out and valuing those different perspectives. And that brings me to the last point, I would say, Mitch, is listen well. I can't tell you how many times, and I've done this totally guilty, 100%, where someone's asking me a question and before they even finish the question, I'm formulating an answer and actually interrupting them and not letting them finish their question. And again, it goes back to the 3-minute world we live in today. And when you actually listen well, and one of the things I've had to do in my career is I have to sit on my hands, or I have to literally, or write a note, right? I usually tell somebody when we're going to meet, look, if I'm writing a note, it's not that I'm not listening. I'm wanting to make sure I can actually stay in flow with you, but I didn't want to forget something that as you were talking, I wanted to say. And that's a real practical skill actually to do, to actually listen to somebody the whole way through, not interrupt them, and actually think about what they said without formulating an answer. And then really taking those perspectives that I talked about, thinking about your say-do ratio, thinking about your curiosity. And so listening well, seeking out different perspectives, having a high say-do ratio, be curious. These are all intangible elements that people can work on day in and day out. They're going to help you get better and actually differentiate yourself in the world today. You're all going to pick up the agentic stuff. You're all going to, my day was Excel and WYSIWYG. And so, it's just a new fangled piece of technology. Everybody's going to figure that out. And there'll be varying degrees of expertise. But those 4 areas I just talked about, Mitch, are what I think help differentiate me over time.
Oh, this is great. What a nice punch list of things that I think make a huge difference for people. So thanks for sharing that. I'm curious. We've got students who are seeking to have a successful career like yours in finance. While they're here at Simon, often they're wondering what should we do here, and how can we make the most of our time. What kind of advice do you have for students in that kind of situation?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I would tell you you're at a world-class school. And when I left Simon, I was able to compete with anybody in the world. And so it's an unbelievable opportunity you have in your hands. And I think a couple of things really to take advantage of that opportunity. First of all, seek deep understanding of the fundamentals of fact-based decision making. Like I said, that was one of the reasons why I went to the Simon School. And as it turns out, macro and micro are still true. As it turns out, all the statistics are now in this thing called agentic AI. Like that's still true. As it turns out, the principles of corporate finance and how much debt to have or not have to enable you to drive growth strategies to drive shareholder value over time, still all true 30 years later. And I would purport that they're going to be true for another 30 years. They may evolve into how you use them differently, for sure. That's definitely happened. But I was on a call today with somebody. We were talking about supply and demand of car repair people in the network of car repair shops that we had, and the delay in the demand signal and the impact of that on how much buffer you had to keep in your system. Like that all sounds familiar from 30 years ago, and it's all going to be familiar for tomorrow. It's supply, demand, it's statistics, it's corporate finance. And so I think what I did well was immerse myself in those fundamentals. And I'll give you a couple of examples of things that stuck with me, and they're not technical finance things, but it's just what you get at Simon, right? And so one of them was, in one of the corporate finance classes, we had the opportunity to read about the theory of the firm. And that's based on a paper written by Jensen and Meckling in 1976, titled Value of the Firm. But what the Simon School did with it was they made it practical in the world, not just a theoretical paper. And so my memory of that wasn't reading the paper. My memory of that was the idea of three legs of the stool. So in that theory of the firm, they talk about decision-making rights. They talk about how you monitor and bond with shareholders and managers. But really the three legs of the stool are what I took away, which is you assign somebody a decision-making right, you measure them on that decision-making right, and then you pay them on that decision-making right. And when you get those three legs of the stool right, the stool stands up. You don't have to fiddle around with it. You don't have to mess around with it. It's going to operate as an ongoing ecosystem that it kind of reinforces itself. You don't have to play around with it. And for 30 years and until today, this isn't something I just did a Google search on. Like I talk about the theory of the firm all the time in the context of the three legs of the stool. And as a senior leader, if you can get that right, then you don't have to fiddle with the organism. You can actually just let it live and breathe and work for you. And so I spent a lot of time trying to do just that, right? So that's a practical application of understanding the basics of fundamental decision making. Another I think key example for me was sitting in the front row of Cliff Smith's corporate finance class, and going through kind of decision making and analytics, and again, like I'm not going to bore you with all the fundamental details; they're all important. But what stood out to me was the following quote from Cliff Smith, which is, "I hate averages. Let me tell you why. If your head is in the freezer and your feet are in the oven, on average, you're fine." Right. And so what that translates to me in this world is whenever I see an average, I want to disaggregate that down to the level at which the operations are actually happening. So the average doesn't tell me the wrong story, and I actually understand it at a fundamental level. And so these are, again, just simple fundamental things that for 30 years I've been applying that you all have the opportunity to put to work. Now, I'd say the third part that I probably didn't understand as well, and I wish somebody would have told me, was network. And, don't do it in an annoying way, but do it in a I want to learn way, as opposed to can you give me a job way. If you do it in a I want to learn way, someone's going to give you a job, as opposed to I'm on the call just to listen to see if you have an opportunity for me. And so when you network, do your homework. Understand where where that person has traveled, learn about kind of where they've gone in their career. There's plenty of ways to do that in today's world. And then ask them really good questions that you would want to know for you to be successful as you start your career. And then at the end of the call, yeah, sure, you should ask them, is there any opportunity you might have for me? Or is there another two or three people you'd recommend I network with? And when you invest the time to do that, and what I mean by invest the time is it's a class. You have to add it to your schedule every Thursday morning for 2 hours. You're doing networking. You're in the alumni office. You're looking through, the network. You're understanding who you want to contact and reach out to. You do it in a systematic way. If you talk to 5 people once a week, right, and then they give you another 3 or 5 people to talk to, and you do that consistently for a month, it's an amazing number of opportunities you present for yourself. And so that's directly in your control. No one's going to tell you to do it for the rest of your career either, by the way. And so as you go through your career, if you're mid-career, you should be doing the same thing. Every Friday morning, I used to do an hour of networking, and I used to do individual meetings internally, speak to mentors, advocates, different people in my network, and actually work at it. And when you do that, then you're not calling people when you just need your network, which is also not a great way to have a network. You're calling people when you don't need your network to establish those relationships and build that trust. And so that's the part that I think I've gotten a lot better at, Mitch, over the last 30 years, and still could be better at it. I had to call up a former mentor of mine earlier in the week, and I hadn't talked to him in like 6 months, and I felt really terrible about that. That was not a great call for me to do. Like, he didn't care. I've known him for a long time, so he kind of got it. But I was like, you know what? I really kind of let myself down here. I haven't stayed in touch with that person. I need to get better at that. So yeah, seek deep understanding of the fundamentals. They will pay off. They will still be true. Really look for those nuggets when you're in a classroom of write it down, make sure you take a mental note. They'll come back to you. And then, network.
That's great. And I hope all of our students hear this message, especially the network. That's the hardest one for often students going to get so focused on the academics that they forget about those critical parts of building kind of how they learn and grow beyond the classroom. Well, I want to, thinking about pivotal decisions you had in your early career that set you on this path that you've been able to take. I'm curious, you know, just understanding some of those pivotal decisions, and then is there anything you would have done differently now that you've got the benefit of hindsight as you moved along in your career?
Yeah, yeah. Look, I think there were a couple in my career, Mitch. One was going to the Simon School. That was a pivotal decision in my career. My dad thought I was crazy. He's like, wait a minute. I was married, young, newly married. He's like, let me understand this. You're going to go back to school and you're not going to have a job for like 2 years. Like, that's crazy. You shouldn't do that. So it was one of the rare moments in my life where I didn't listen to my dad, and it kind of worked out. So I think the Simon School set me on a much different path than I otherwise would have been. And again, back to those fundamentals. So that was one for sure. I think I was in treasury at Dell, and I wanted to be the treasurer at Dell, and I joined in January of 2000. This would have been about 2004. And I was doing pretty well. And the treasurer, kind of sat me down and said, look, Gary, you need to leave treasury in order to actually go get a broader base of experience in order to be successful as a treasurer. And I thought he was crazy. I'm like, what do you mean leave? Like, if I leave, you're not going to know who I am anymore. And I love treasury. I eat and breathe it all day long. Like, that's what I want to be and do. And you want me to go do something else? And I was like, I don't want to do that. And he shoved me out of, literally pushed me out of treasury. And I joined, I was a controller and head of FP&A for our captive finance business. And that was the best piece of advice I ever got professionally. And from there, it stoked my interest in just, continuously learning and getting new roles. And so that was great advice. And I think the third thing that I would kind of lean on is a peer of mine, right? I got my first manager job at Dell, and I had come from consulting, and I moved from New York City to Austin, Texas, slightly different pace, and I was kind of, I didn't know it, but running people over to get stuff done. I wasn't getting stuff done in a very good how way, but I got a lot of stuff done fast. I got my first manager job, and I kind of took that same approach to being a manager. And my peers, after about 6 months, kind of sat me down. He's like, "Hey, Gary, like nobody wants to work for you. They really think that you're leaving all the dead bodies behind while you're getting all the credit, and like
Mm.
that's not going to really be great for you." And I still know that guy's name, and Ed helped me out tremendously, and that changed my path forward relative to how do I walk in the door every day and think about I'm only as good as my team. And that was something he didn't have to do. And we were peers, and so he made me better as a person and as a manager, as a professional. And that that feedback was something that was a pivotal moment in my life, and I decided to do something about it. And a lot of people get feedback in their career and decide not to do something about it. But whether you think that feedback is right or wrong, you should at least take it in, because it is somebody's perspective, and you should make a conscious decision what to do about it. So those were a couple, I think, kind of early on seminal moments that,
Mhm. Mhm.
pivoted me in my career, and what I took forward from them.
It's great to have those people that are sort of looking out for you, even when you don't realize that's what they're doing for you necessarily, and helping direct your career. You've worked across a number of industries, and your sort of leadership style. I'm sure you've had to adapt. You mentioned a little bit about change over time in that as well, so maybe development. But as you've been moving between the industries, what's really translated most easily, and what have you had to kind of adapt the most?
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that I actually pride myself on, Mitch, is the ability to jump from industry to industry and understand different business models. Um, and I think what I lean hard on, and I'm just going to be a broken record here, is the fundamentals that I talked about earlier. And as it turns out, everybody's selling something to a customer, and everybody's building something to sell to a customer, and everybody's marketing something to a customer to try to differentiate yourself. And in order to learn a new industry, what I did was I went out on sales calls. Right? And so I called up a couple of sales reps, and we went out on the road, and I got to see them pitch kind of how they were selling the products, and really understand kind of the customer's perspective on our products. And then I sat down with people that were making our stuff, be it a radiation therapy device, or some software that we were coding on the product side in a fintech, or down on the shop floor at Dell putting PCs together. And so then you get to see kind of how the product comes together and all the nuances that come around with that, right? And then go spend time with the HR leader, go spend time with the marketing leader, and really walk in their shoes, understand what they do, ask questions, learn, seek for understanding. And so I did that every time, and every time it helped me two things. One is I got to know the business, but two, people saw me do that, and they're like, "What? Like he actually isn't just sitting in the ivory tower spitting finance at everybody. He actually knows what's going on around here." And so you kind of demonstrate that you're willing to learn and understand, and that creates a different kind of relationship. So I've done that in all aspects of that, and I have to do it today at Hellman and Friedman, given the multiple industries that we're in as well. I think what I've done a little bit differently is, probably think more longer term as I, enter a new industry, and probably step back and understand the strategic dynamics of an industry a bit more than I did earlier on, and really try to pick apart, again, kind of where we're winning, where we're losing, how are we playing in these markets, how other people are playing the game, and then look forward and reason back more. And so lengthen my horizon to the extent that then I can have a material impact over multiple horizons of the company, and not just the next 12, 18, or 24 months. And I think that's come with the recognition that to win, you have to actually be able to pivot. You can't just keep running the same plays. And it's a lot easier to pivot, inside of your opportunity set, or maybe one adjacency away, and enter a market that's maybe moving a little faster and growing a little faster than it is to duke it out, for share day in and day out, and run that play. And so I think it came with a different elevation in an organization and where I was asked to spend time. But I wish I would have done that earlier in my career to really understand the strategic dynamics in the industry.
Great. Again, there's so many nuggets there that we could go into for a long time, but I want to shift us to audience questions now. We talked about being able to do that, and so it's been a pleasure getting to talk with you. And I want to get a chance for audience to submit questions, and we've already got some submitted, and so I'll read a couple of those here. But other folks, feel free to submit questions as well. So first one is, you've navigated significant change, and you mentioned how dynamic the environment is right now and how critical adaptability has become. On a personal level, how do you stay ahead of that pace? Are there frameworks, books, podcasts, or habits that have shaped the way you think and lead today?
Yeah, that's an amazing question. Like super top of mind for me, and something that Mitch, I spend the majority of my time now trying to find out what I don't know. And so that's how I focus my efforts, is trying to figure out what I don't know, because there's a lot of different ways you could tackle all of these things. And then I think in that effort, try to pick one or two things a month. Don't try to do them all at once. And so you really have to kind of prioritize something and give it a good shot for a month or so, and then move on to the next thing. And I do think that the fundamentals that I talked about earlier will help you in accelerating through that learning process. And some of it, you just have to trust the fact that maybe you don't need to be an expert in that area. Maybe you need to surround yourself with people that are experts in that area. And think about, therefore, where do you also prioritize your time through that lens? So, for example, for me in the AI world, right? I know I'm not going to go, write, an agentic AI solution for anybody tomorrow, but I know enough about the technology, the underpinnings of that technology, to be able to ask the right questions from people who are experts in that to help them solve business problems with that technology. And so figure out where you provide that unique perspective, know enough about that topic to be able to influence in that conversation. Or other places where I need to go deep. Where I went deep on that was third-party applications in the finance world, and therefore, how can our finance organizations use the new add-on features in Workday or Microsoft Dynamics or Salesforce in order to drive and influence decision-making in our portfolio companies. I went super deep there, right? The use cases and applications and how do we actually get that done. So that's, so I'd say prioritize, focus on where you add value. That's how I try to sort it all out.
Well, that's and I like the technology shift there at the end, because the next question is about AI. So as AI becomes more integrated in day-to-day operations across industries, what trends are you noticing, and how finance teams are adopting or thinking about AI?
Yeah, I think, like I said, it's super fun time to be out there in the world figuring this stuff out. And I think what's still going to be true, and has been true for many years of disruptive innovation, is that this technology will make humans that are assisted by this technology better. And so, so that's how I kind of come at this first of all. And what trends I'm seeing is ensuring that your data is complete relative to something you want to learn on. And so it used to be ensuring your data was clean. And today, the artificial intelligence and a lot of the latest developments can actually take unstructured data and now structured data and transform that for you. So you don't have to have a kind of clean data set. You have to have a complete data set. And a lot of people are getting lost on that part. is they think it has to be clean. I mean, it can't be kind of all over the place, but it can be a lot more unstructured than it was 5 years ago. So that's one theme. Another theme that's clear that I think will continue to accelerate is this concept of, in order for people to get the benefit of the technology, they have to adopt the technology. And so understanding adoption is the first aspect of this curve. And what's it going to take for people to adopt it? Just stuffing the technology down somebody's throat does not mean they're going to adopt it. And so driving adoption is, I'd say today, 80% of the battle. And then people are playing around with it, and they'll start to get ideas on how to use this. And those ideas will start to work through organizations. And so I think driving adoption is the second kind of big theme. I think third is, from a finance point of view perspective, don't look for the ROI yet. Like, it's not there in most organizations. It's not going to be there anytime soon. But you're changing the way people are thinking and doing business. And eventually that's going to aggregate into a massive productivity lift. And if you try to measure it too soon, this is a hard thing for a former CFO, COO to say, but if you try to measure it too soon, you're going to stifle the innovation and ideas and creativity that come with it, because you're going to end up telling people how to use it as opposed to getting in their hands, getting them to adopt it, and then see what you get back. And so that's the hard part. Technology-wise, look, I can't emphasize enough the idea of ensuring that you understand and have the integrity of the data and any biases related to the learnings you're deriving from that model. And don't let biases creep into what you do. It's happened for way too long in this world, and it's happening still today. And it's a human comment, not a political comment. And we, as executives, we're responsible for ensuring that there's no bias in what it is we're doing today. And please, I would just encourage you to take that into consideration as you all are working your way through this.
Well, thank you for that perspective. That's again, once again, you've managed to hit many nuggets all in one short answer there. I want to pivot a little bit here to something maybe closer to the career side question. So, I was thinking about recent graduates or students who are aspiring to build a career in strategic finance, or even more specifically, private equity portfolio operations. What are some entry points that are most effective for getting in? And when you're hiring, what truly differentiates candidates who stand out from those who simply look strong on paper?
Yeah, that's a great question. And look, it took me almost 30 years to get to private equity. So I don't know if I'm an expert in this area, but I'll share what I learned on this side of the fence now that I've made it. The consulting skills are wildly important because it enables you to think about things critically, ask good questions, and then really understand them deeply. And so consulting is a good way to drive your way through into a private equity world, be it investor or operator. Banking, same thing. I think, going through different banking experiences, investment banking experiences. Again, you're looking at different industries in terms of how you position and market that company. And therefore, you have to understand the strategic dynamics. You have to understand capital structure. You have to understand kind of how you pitch that company to investors. Also a very valuable skill, maybe a bit more on the investor side than on the operator side. And then third, if you can do those things and have been in a company and done real work, not that consultants or bankers don't do real work, they do real work, but actually run a company, right? Or been part of a big aspect of running a company, on the product side or the technology side or go to market or finance, like marketing. Those are all good areas that translate to you then being better on this side of the fence, because you then have a practical understanding of what it takes to actually not just drive an investment thesis, but to capture value, right? And capturing value is just as hard, if not harder, than coming up with the investment thesis. And so as it relates to particularly on the operating partner side, there's some really good operations consulting firms out there in the world, BCG, McKinsey, they all have deep operational experience, Bain, and getting out there and seeing different industries is a great way to go. I did it through the School of Hard Knocks in corporate America, but I got 8 jobs in 17 years. And so the other bit of experience there inside I would tell you is just rotate. Don't stick in one functional area.
Mm.
And the way I try to help young professionals think about that is early on, experiences is the equivalent of building the net present value of your career. And so the more experiences you get, the higher your net present value of career is, because once you go through your career, that then gives you another thing that creates value. In the finance terms, you're creating options. We all know options are valuable, right? And so I could be more than just the treasurer. I could be the CFO, the COO, maybe even the CEO. And so by getting those different experiences, the net present value of my career went way up. And then over time, you accrete that future value to your net present value. So the objective early on isn't to get what I would call an increase in your P&L, i.e. a raise next year. It's about increasing the net present value of your career by getting more experiences and skills. And so that often is lost on young professionals. And that's ultimately what gives you the value over time, is being able to connect dots, even more so in the world we're going to live in the next 5 to 15 years. How you collaborate and kind of see the entire process, and therefore optimize the process with the technology tools with you and deliver value to customers. That's going to be how you're going to win.
This is great stuff, and I'm sure we could keep going for another few hours, I'm sure, but we're in the process of winding down here. So I want to again just take a moment to thank you, Gary, for a truly incredible conversation today. So many nuggets. I know I was jotting things down throughout because there was so much valuable stuff here, and I'm sure if more people could be on your team and get that coaching that you were talking about, they must be some lucky individuals to have that. You continue to make us, Simon, proud. I'm just really grateful for the time you've taken to share your knowledge with our community today. And again, I want to thank the students, alumni, faculty, everybody for joining us today for this conversation. We thank you for your time, and I hope to see you all at another webinar soon. Meliora, and I just want to also say, I know we didn't get to every question, but we'll share those out and hopefully to circle back on some of that as well. So thank you again, Gary.
Dean Lovett, thank you very much. Pleasure to spend time with everybody today, and enjoy the rest of your week. Meliora.
Meliora.